The faint clinking of crystal glasses rang out like hundreds of shards falling onto a polished marble floor. Inside the Langford Hotel's grand ballroom, chandeliers cast a lavish glow, reflecting off the glittering gowns of Chicago's elite. The ladies smiled at each other with eyes as sharp as glass. The gentlemen shook hands with grips full of calculation rather than warmth. And amid that opulent world, Claire Donovan was nearly invisible. She wore a gray-white uniform, collar buttoned, hands balancing a tray of red wine. Her steps were light, precise, quiet enough not to disturb anyone, steady enough not to slip on the sleek marble floor beneath the towering heels around her. Every breath Claire took had to be measured. One mistake, one spilled glass on a $10,000 gown, and her job would be gone. And that job was the only thing keeping her and her mother from falling into despair. 3 months earlier, her mother, Helen, had been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Chemotherapy no longer worked. The doctor's voice had fallen low, as if fearing his own words. There's an experimental treatment, but it's extremely expensive. So expensive that even 10 years of nonstop work couldn't cover it. That's why Claire was here at a charity gala for the ultra-rich, where people donated hundreds of thousands, not for compassion, but for reputation. From her corner, Claire could see the woman who held everyone's gaze. Eleanor Beaumont, 52, owner of the city's largest real estate empire, her metallic silver gown sculpted to a body perfected by surgeons. Beside her stood Lucas Beaumont, her only son, 28, handsome, confident, and rotten to the bone. Claire had heard of him. The media called Lucas the Prince of Chicago. Among the staff, he had another name, the Predator of the Gala Nights. "You there? Come here." His voice carried across the room, lazy, but laced with command. Claire froze. He was looking straight at her, pointing at the tray in her hand as though issuing an order. Bordeaux, the most expensive one. She walked over, polite and composed, and poured half a glass. "What's your name?" Lucas asked, his smirk sharp and careless. "Claire." "Sir?" "Claire," he repeated softly, tilting his head. "Pretty name. But you must know here, we don't drink half a glass. Fill it up." She swallowed her protest and poured more. The wine overflowed slightly, dark red like blood, dripping down his fingers. Lucas chuckled, wiped it off with a handkerchief then, in one cruelly playful motion, tipped the glass over her head. Cold wine soaked her hair, trickled down her neck, and seeped through the thin fabric of her uniform. Laughter erupted around them. Phones lifted. Flashes burst like lightning across the ballroom. Claire stood still. Each drop that hit the floor stabbed at her pride. Lucas smiled. "Mocking? Oops, my bad. But you should know. A server shouldn't look guests in the eyes." "Claire, humility is how one survives here." Eleanor's lips curved slightly, not in sympathy, but in disdain. Her gaze swept over Claire, drenched and trembling, like a stain in her perfect evening. Claire bowed her head. Her hands trembled. "Not from cold. I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it up." She knelt down, wiping the floor as if scrubbing away the last trace of her dignity. Around her, conversations resumed. Laughter flowed. The world spun on as if nothing had happened. But from a shadowed corner, someone hadn't looked away. He stood by the balcony rail, apart from the glittering crowd. A perfectly tailored black suit, no tie, top buttons undone, eyes deep enough to hold the whole Chicago night. Claire didn't know his name, but she felt that gaze not of pity nor curiosity, but something else entirely quiet, fierce, unreadable. When she finally left the ballroom, he was still there, glass untouched, eyes following her until her small silhouette disappeared through the doors. Outside, night fell heavy over the city. Cold wind from Lake Michigan swept through the cobblestone streets. Claire sat at a bus stop, uniform clinging wet to her skin. Her phone blinked $14 left in her account. Tonight's shift was supposed to pay $160, but the wine incident would surely cost her. Her mother needed medicine. Rent was due. Life didn't wait for tears. She lifted her head toward the distant glow of the city. In the reflection of the glass shelter, her face looked pale, her hair sticky with wine. She barely recognized herself. Then a quiet engine. A sleek black car stopped in front of her. The window slid down, revealing the man from the gala. Streetlight spilled over his cheekbones. catching the steel gray in his eyes calm, dangerous. "Miss Donovan." His voice was low, roughened at the edges, resonant in the night. "You'll catch a cold if you stay here 5 more minutes." Claire frowned. "I'm sorry. Do I know you, Ryan Cooper?" he said, without hesitation. "We need to talk. About what, Justice?" The wind stirred, tossing her damp hair. Something in his tone, not pity, but a promise, made her heart tremble. "Justice." She gave a weary laugh. In this world, Ryan tilted his head slightly, eyes unwavering. In this world, justice doesn't always live in the law. Sometimes it lives in the hands of those who dare. The car door opened. "Get in, Claire. Don't be afraid. I just want to talk." She hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Never trust strangers at night. But there was something in Ryan's voice, a shiver that was part fear, part curiosity, that drew her in. For the first time in years, Claire ignored reason. She stepped inside. The black BMW glided into the darkness, leaving behind the faint yellow light of the bus stop. The whole city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to begin. Along Lakeshore Drive, Ryan glanced at the girl beside him. City lights danced across the windshield, illuminating her face, tired, yet lit by a strange, quiet strength. He didn't speak, just turned on the radio. An old jazz tune filled the car, soft as smoke. Outside, snow began to fall. Claire watched the first snowflakes drift past the window. Something stirred deep inside her, a feeling that destiny had quietly shifted course. She didn't yet know that the man beside her, with eyes colder than the snow itself, would soon become the only light in her shadowed world. But light, sometimes, knows how to burn. Some nights begin with humiliation, but end with the turning of fate. If you want to know what happens when Claire accepts Ryan Cooper's midnight invitation, where love and danger blur into the same breath, stay tuned for part 2 and uncover the secret behind the midnight offer. Hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of this darkly alluring journey. The hum of the car engine echoed steadily through the night, gliding down Chicago's empty streets like the calm breath of a predator at rest, waiting for its moment to strike. Claire sat in the back seat, hands on her lap, trying to keep calm. Beyond the window, city lights stretched into streaks of gold, flickering like fading memories. Ryan Cooper said nothing. He drove with an unnerving composure, as if picking up a drenched waitress in the middle of the night was something entirely ordinary. The BMW stopped in front of a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet riverside street. Steam fogged the windows, and the warm amber light inside spilled gently into the darkness, soothing, inviting, almost like an apology. Ryan stepped out and opened her door. "Go in. No one's going to hurt you here." Claire hesitated, then followed. Inside, the restaurant was completely empty. Only 2 chairs faced each other across a table, a bottle of unopened wine, 2 crystal glasses, and a soft jazz tune drifting lazily through the air. Ryan pulled out a chair for her, his voice low and husky, yet not cold. "Would you like a drink?" "No, thank you." "I think I've had enough wine for one night," Claire replied dryly. He smiled faintly. "Fair. I wasn't planning on drinking either. Truth is, I hate parties like that. Full of fakes." She tilted her head slightly. "Then why were you there?" Ryan shrugged. "Because in that world, presence is power. You show up to prove you still control the game." Claire said nothing. She still couldn't grasp who this man was or why he cared about her. A nameless, powerless girl with nothing worth noticing. "Why did you bring me here?" Ryan leaned back, fingers interlaced, his gaze settling on her face, not invasive, not possessive, but analytical, like he was reading a language written in silence. "To talk about justice." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Justice. In this city, you planning to sue them for pouring wine on my head?" he said, voice dropping lower. "I plan to make them regret it." The simple statement carried a weight that stilled the air between them. Claire stared at him, trying to tell if he was joking, but Ryan's eyes didn't know how to lie. "What are you planning to do?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he uncorked the wine, poured a glass for her, then set it in the middle of the table, not insisting, just offering. "Have you ever thought," he began quietly, that some people are born only to be stepped on, and others are born to remind them what fear feels like. She stayed silent. The dim light from above caught the hard line of Ryan's jaw. Beneath his black shirt, there was a quiet strength not flaunted, but dangerous, like a storm still gathering. "Who are you?" she asked softly. Ryan's reply came slow, deliberate. "I run an international logistics company, shipping, trade, documentation." He paused, locking eyes with her. "And sometimes, things that don't make it onto paper." A shiver ran through her. Each word seemed to linger in the air, weaving itself between the lazy notes of the jazz song, part allure, part threat. "You've been following me." Ryan didn't deny it. "I prefer the term paying attention to the right person. Your name is Claire Donovan. 26, degree in linguistics. Speaks 5 languages. Mother, stage 3 ovarian cancer. Insurance denied coverage." Each word sliced through the fragile distance between them. Claire froze. Her fists clenched as anger and fear rushed up her spine. "You investigated me?" "No," he said calmly, but firmly. "I looked into what I needed to help you. There will be new hospital grants approved for St. Mary's. Soon they'll get the funds." "Why?" she whispered. Out of pity, Ryan met her gaze, gray eyes heavy with smoke. "Because I can't stand watching someone be humiliated without the power to fight back." Claire fell silent. Under the soft golden light, his face was unreadable. Yet something in his voice made her believe him, even as every instinct warned her he was dangerous. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "You deserve more than this. Claire, I want to offer you a job." She gave a dry, skeptical laugh. "Let me guess, waitress in a different restaurant?" "No." Ryan's lips curved faintly. "Interpreter. I need someone sharp, discreet, and observant. I think you're the right fit. And if I refuse, then you'll still get paid for tonight, plus compensation for what happened." He paused, eyes steady. "But if you accept, I promise, your life will never be the same again." Silence lingered. Claire stared at the wine before her, red as a bloodstone. Any conditions, Ryan's tone didn't waver. Just one: honesty. "With me and with yourself, is your business legal?" He didn't flinch. Depends how you define that word. The answer hung between them, blurring the line between jest and truth. Instead of fear, Claire felt something else, a strange, magnetic pull, like standing before a glittering abyss. "You're a dangerous man." Ryan tilted his head, eyes glinting with an incomplete smile. "Maybe, but danger isn't always evil. Some people need to remember they can't stay on top forever." Her gaze softened slightly. "And me? What am I in your plan?" "You're the one person who isn't afraid to look truth in the eye." He stood, reached into his coat, and placed an envelope before her. "Inside is a temporary contract. Read it carefully. It's perfectly legal on paper." Claire didn't touch it. "And the things not on paper?" Ryan smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made her heart skip. "Those are mine to bear." When they stepped outside, snow was falling thicker now. Streetlights spilled silver onto Ryan's black coat. Claire pulled her jacket tighter, cold biting through her fingers. "Do you really believe in justice?" she asked. Voice barely a whisper. Ryan didn't turn back. "I believe in balance. Whoever sows humiliation must reap it in equal measure." She watched his back, realizing that beneath that calm, there was something deeply lonely. He stopped, turning toward her, eyes softening. "You can call me if you need help." He took out a card, Cooper Logistics, private division. No address, just a single number. "And if you decide to accept the job, come to the Edgewater building, 21st floor, 8 a.m., Monday." She took the card, her hand trembling. "I'm not sure. You don't have to be. Just show up." Ryan opened the car door. The night wind rushed in, carrying the scent of snow and smoke. He sat behind the wheel, started the engine, then said quietly, "Opportunities don't knock twice. Claire." She stood there, watching the car fade into the misty street, its red taillights burning like streaks of fire. In her hand, the card felt cold, but her heart burned hot. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Ryan's voice echoed in her mind. I plan to make them regret it. She didn't know whether she was more afraid or intrigued. And when dawn's pale light slipped through the curtains, Claire realized something profound. In life, some invitations don't come from luck, they come from destiny. And destiny often begins with a man like Ryan Cooper. Morning in Chicago was cold and damp. Drops of dew still clung to the window frame as Claire stood before Edgewater Tower, where the name Cooper Logistics gleamed in embossed silver. She tightened her grip on the business card in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. The building was unlike anywhere she had ever worked, tall, luxurious, and eerily quiet. The air inside carried the scent of fresh oak blended with dark coffee refined, but shadowed by something secretive. She had arrived half an hour early, perhaps out of fear that she might change her mind. The receptionist greeted her with a polished smile. Good morning, Miss Donovan. Mr. Cooper is expecting you on the 21st floor. The words made her pause. It was as if Ryan had known she would come, and somehow, that realization made her both uneasy and strangely comforted. The elevator chimed softly. Claire stepped in and watched the numbers climb. M18, 20. When the doors opened at the 21st floor, the world seemed to change. Glass walls overlooked the misty expanse of Lake Michigan. Desks were arranged with surgical precision, every detail elegant, deliberate, perfect. The air here pulsed with order and power. Ryan Cooper stood by the window, back turned to her. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Morning light traced along his arms, emphasizing strength that didn't need to be flaunted. You're punctual, he said, turning slightly. His gray eyes glinted with a faint smile. I like people who are. Actually, I'm 15 minutes early. Even better. He smiled lightly, then gestured to a nearby desk. This will be your workspace. I've sent your contract to HR for processing. But first, there's something I want to show you. He led her down a long hallway where sunlight streamed through the glass, reflecting off the polished floor in waves of gold. Everyone they passed gave a respectful nod. Some even looked wary. They entered a large room, part office, part war room. A massive world map stretched across the wall, dotted with red markers connected by thin lines like strands of a spider's web. This is Cooper Logistics Transport Network, Ryan said in his steady, low voice. From Italy and Spain to New York, Chicago, and the Port of New Orleans, each point represents shipments, contracts, and thousands of people depending on them. Claire's eyes moved to the giant digital screen filled with shifting data. I thought this was a shipping company, but this looks far more complex. Ryan's gaze flicked to her. I never do anything halfway. Your job is to ensure every foreign document we handle is flawless. One mistranslated word could cost us millions or a life. His tone wasn't threatening. It was simply factual. Claire nodded, trying to mask the unease that rose within her. I understand. No. Claire. His eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. You're intelligent, but I don't need you to just understand. I need you to see, to listen, and to remember. There are things I'll never say aloud. Something inside her tightened at his words. In her first days, Claire realized that Cooper Logistics ran like a vast, living machine, terrifyingly precise. Documents arrived from Europe. She translated, revised, verified. International calls followed one after another. The hum of keyboards, printers, and footsteps blended into the rhythm of another world. But the longer she stayed, the clearer it became this wasn't just commerce. Sometimes, sealed envelopes arrived by hand, bypassing the entire delivery system. Sometimes, there were closed-door meetings at 2 a.m, where the men entering wore unreadable expressions, and not a single one smiled. Ryan always appeared calm, but there were moments when he changed. His eyes would sharpen, his tone drop, and the entire room would seem to stop breathing. She didn't ask questions, but the questions multiplied anyway. One Thursday afternoon, while she was sorting Spanish contracts, Ryan appeared behind her. Mind if I sit for a moment? Of course not, she said quickly, though her heart picked up its pace. He sat beside her, leaning slightly forward, his cologne carrying a faint note of wood and smoke. Settling in all right. I'm trying my best. Sir, call me Ryan. She blinked. I think employees should maintain some distance from their boss. Ryan's lips curved a small smile meant only for her. Distance only matters when one of them is trying to run away. The remark made her turn her head away. You say that as if I'm the one running. Aren't you? His voice lowered, nearly a whisper. That night, I saw it you wanted to leave, but you stayed. Maybe because you're curious, or maybe because you realize that sometimes the shadows tell the truth better than the light. Claire looked up and met his eyes deep. Still. Endless. You're not like anyone I've ever met. I hope that's a compliment. I'm not sure yet. They both laughed softly, a brief sound that seemed to warm the room. Yet something inside her began to shift. That night, after everyone had gone, Claire stayed behind to finish an Italian contract. The golden desk lamp bathed her papers in soft amber light. She didn't hear the door open. Ryan walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Working late? This contract's due tomorrow morning. Diligence is good. He set a cup in front of her. No sugar. Extra milk. Am I right? She looked up, surprised. You remembered small details say a lot about a person. They sat across from each other. The light caught in his eyes, shimmering like reflections on water. Outside, snow began to fall, silent and white, drifting past the glass like secrets no one dared to speak. Do you ever feel like you're in the wrong place? Ryan asked quietly. Claire paused. What do you mean, you weren't born to run? I saw it that first night the way you looked at them after they humiliated you. That wasn't the gaze of someone broken. It was the gaze of someone learning to wait for the right moment to strike back. His words swept through her like cold air, then left behind something strangely warm. You know, Claire murmured, sometimes a single person can make you see the world differently. I don't know what you really want from me, Ryan, but I know I'm not the same waitress from that night. Ryan's expression softened almost proud. And I'm not the man who just stood and watched. Silence filled the room. The faint jazz melody from the hidden speakers drifted between them slow, tender, like a shared heartbeat. Ryan traced the rim of his coffee cup with one finger. Tomorrow, I'll show you the real work, the things that don't show up on payroll. Do I get a choice? He smiled, the kind of smile that sent her pulse racing. There's always a choice. Claire? But every choice has its price. That night, back in her small apartment, Claire sat by the window watching the snowfall. On the table lay the freshly signed contract and Ryan's business card, its corner slightly worn, as if handled too many times. Her fingers brushed across the silver letters Ryan Cooper, Executive Director, and beneath it, in smaller print private division, no address, no website, only a single phone number. In the corner of the contract, she noticed something odd, 3 tiny slashes, nearly invisible. To most, they'd mean nothing. But to someone trained in linguistics, they were a form of ancient cipher used in classified documents. She closed her eyes. Perhaps she really had stepped into another world, one where language wasn't just for communication, but for concealment. Outside, the snow kept falling. And inside Claire, something else was falling too softly, but irreversibly. Friday night. The 21st floor was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of amber lights reflecting on wide glass panels. Most of the staff had gone home. Only the sound of wind seeping through the door frame and the rhythmic tapping of Claire's keyboard filled the silence steady. Calm, like a heartbeat. On her desk, a stack of Italian documents lay open, though her mind had drifted far from the printed words. 3 weeks had passed since she'd signed her contract with Cooper Logistics. Time moved quickly, yet everything around her still felt divided, as if she were living between 2 worlds, one bright and polished, where trade contracts gleamed with perfection, and another hidden beneath, where every word, every number seemed to conceal something larger. Ryan never spoke it aloud. He didn't need to. A glance, a nod that was enough for everyone to understand. She had once watched him sit silently for 10 minutes before signing a document. When his pen finally touched the paper, the assistant beside him exhaled like someone released from a death sentence. There was something about Ryan not loud, not forceful yet. His authority was undeniable, the kind that commanded both respect and fear.
And Claire, for reasons she couldn't explain, found peace in that danger.
Tonight, Ryan was in a closed meeting. He'd told her she could go home early, but she stayed. Not for work. For curiosity. These secret meetings always intrigued her. No one entered uninvited. And no one knew what was discussed. Every time they ended, Ryan emerged with the same distant look, cold, tired, and so silent she never dared to ask. Near 10 o'clock, light still spilled through the narrow crack of the meeting room door, a thin line slicing across the darkness. She rose and quietly brought a cup of hot coffee to leave outside. A small, wordless ritual. But as she placed it down, she heard voices inside low, harsh, and urgent. "We lost 2 men at South Point Dock. Someone leaked the route. If we don't act now, the police will reach the Cooper name." Her heart jumped. She instinctively stepped back, but her hand brushed the door. It creaked open slightly, leaving a narrow gap. Through it, she saw Ryan standing in the center of the room. Light glinted across the polished table scattered with maps and satellite photos. He wasn't the calm executive she saw each morning. Gone was the white shirt and gentle smile. In his place was someone colder, sharper, almost predatory. "Stay calm," Ryan said quietly, his tone steady and lethal. "We don't fight in the dark with panic. I want to know who talked, within 48 hours. And if it's one of our own," another man asked, "then I'll handle it myself." At that moment, Claire realized he wasn't just running a company. He was commanding a network, one where laws weren't written in ink, but in blood. A chill raced down her spine. She started to retreat, but her heel brushed a table leg, a small sound. Soft, but fatal. The door opened wider. The room fell silent. Then Ryan's voice broke through. "Claire." She froze. He didn't shout. He didn't sound angry. He simply said her name, calm, measured, terrifying in its stillness. His gray eyes locked on her, deep, quiet, glacial. "Come in." Her pulse hammered as she stepped forward. The men around the table stared, suspicion written across their faces. Ryan crossed his arms, leaning lightly on the table, voice low, almost casual. "How long were you standing outside?" Not long. I was just bringing coffee." "And what did you hear?" "I didn't mean to eavesdrop." He took a step closer. The scent of smoke and cedar wrapped around her, familiar, yet charged with tension. "Answer me, Claire." She met his gaze, only a few words. "About shipments." I didn't understand anything. Silence stretched. His eyes searched hers, not for fear, but for lies. Then he sighed and turned toward the others. "Leave us." A few men hesitated, but one glance from Ryan and they left without a word. When the door clicked shut, silence filled the room again. Ryan stood still for a few seconds, then spoke, voice softer now, but deeper. "Do you know what the most dangerous thing in this world is?" "Claire." She shook her head, curiosity at the wrong time. The words sent a shiver through her, yet beneath the fear, something else stirred, a need to understand, to see who he really was. "You can fire me," Claire said quietly, steady despite the tremor in her chest. "But don't ask me to pretend I didn't notice. You think I haven't seen it. Every document I translate, every code I read, they all mean something more." Ryan studied her, then unexpectedly laughed, low, soft, almost like a sigh. "Clever. I told you before, I needed someone who can see." He circled the table and stopped beside her. "You've heard too much, and I can't let you walk away unprotected. So if I told you that from this moment, you must choose stay and see everything, or leave tonight, what would you choose?" She didn't hesitate. "Stay? Not afraid?" "Yes," Claire said, her voice steady, "but I fear regret more." A faint smile crossed his lips, fleeting, dim like a flickering light. "You have no idea what you've just stepped into, Claire. Then show me." He looked at her for a long moment, torn between reason and something else. "Finally," he said quietly. "Monday, 8 a.m. You'll come with me to the South Warehouse, not to work, to see." Then he walked out, leaving her alone in the hush. The next morning, Chicago was wrapped in fog. Ryan drove, silent, Claire sat beside him, watching the city fade in the rearview mirror. The road narrowed toward the outskirts, flanked by rusted warehouses and chain-link fences. The car stopped before a massive gray building with no sign. No name. He didn't speak as they walked inside. Harsh white light spilled from the ceiling onto endless rows of containers. Men in work gear moved briskly, speaking a blend of Italian and English. Claire stepped carefully, her eyes scanning the printed words. Milan, Port of New Orleans, priority shipment. These are real goods, she asked. Most of them, Ryan said calmly. Wine, fabric, olive oil. But there are others. Others. He turned to her eyes hard steel, things the world prefers not to see. He didn't elaborate, only added quietly, "You asked why I helped you. Because I once owed someone a favor. He trusted the wrong person and died for it. I won't make that mistake again." She looked at him, hearing the sorrow buried beneath the control, the grief that power couldn't erase. "You can still walk away." "Claire," he said softly, "no one will blame you. But if you stay, there's no way back." She was silent for a long moment, then stepped closer. "You saved me once, Ryan. Maybe now it's time I save myself by not running from the truth." A glimmer passed through his eyes, faint, like sunlight skimming frozen water. He held her gaze, then nodded slowly. "Then stay. But remember, once you cross that door, there's no return." That afternoon, as they left the warehouse, wind from Lake Michigan whipped through the air. Claire's hair flew loose, and Ryan, for a brief instant, reached out and caught her hand. The touch was light, but something between them shifted, a boundary quietly erased. She looked up, meeting his eyes restrained, yet burning with dangerous intensity. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He let go, gaze turning away, "Keeping you from the wind." But Claire knew in that fragile space between them, what passed wasn't just the wind. It was something stronger, something real, something far more terrifying than any secret she had ever dared to uncover. The spring rain fell over Chicago, as if the city itself was trying to wash away its sins. Claire stood by her office window, watching droplets lace together on the glass, reflecting the light like thousands of shattered crystals tumbling from the sky. Since the day she stepped into the South Point warehouse, everything had changed. Ryan spoke less now, his silence colder, heavier, but in his eyes, something had shifted, a fragile blend of trust and worry he would never admit aloud. And she, once an outsider, had drifted far too close to the center of the web he tried to hide. That evening, she asked to leave early to visit her mother at the hospital. The rain had turned heavy. Streets gleamed gold beneath the streetlights, their reflections rippling across the puddled asphalt. Claire wrapped her coat tighter, covering her head with one hand as she hurried through the empty parking lot behind the building. The only sound was the mingling of rain and wind until another sound rose behind her. She turned. A figure in a black raincoat approached, his steps slow and deliberate. Her instincts screamed. She stepped back, heart pounding. "Miss Donovan." The man's voice was rough. "We just need a word. Won't take long." "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Someone working for a man you should stay away from." She took another step back, but before she could run, he pulled something glinting from under his coat, a knife. Claire gasped and bolted, slipping on the slick ground. Rain lashed her face. The air smelled of metal and fear. The man advanced, eyes void of emotion. "Don't blame me. Orders are orders." Then an engine roared. A black SUV sped into the lot and screeched to a stop. The door flung open. Ryan stepped out. He carried no umbrella. Rain poured over his shoulders, soaking his shirt and hair, but he didn't care. In the glare of the headlights, his face was a mask of ice so cold it stilled the air itself. "Drop the knife." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut like a blade. "Stay out of this, Cooper. This isn't your concern." Ryan advanced slowly. "She's the only reason I am concerned." The man moved, but too late. Ryan turned. A swift motion, his kick sent the knife flying across the cement. A second strike dropped the attacker hard onto the wet ground. The impact echoed beneath the pounding rain. It was over in seconds. Claire stood frozen, heart racing, rain and blood mingling on the pavement at her feet. Ryan turned toward her. His eyes softened at the sight of her trembling figure, drenched and terrified. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low, tight with strain. "No, just scared," she whispered. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Don't be. No one will ever touch you again." But his hands were shaking though he tried to hide it. He knelt beside the unconscious man, checked his pulse, then pulled out his phone. His tone was clipped, commanding. "Clean it up, no traces, and find out who gave the order." When he hung up, he looked at her again. She was still trembling, rain dripping down her face. But in her eyes, something new flickered, something beyond fear. Understanding. "You killed him, didn't you?" "Ryan." He was silent for a long moment, then shook his head. "No, but I've done worse." Her chest tightened not from fear, but from sorrow. For a man who could say that with such quiet honesty had surely walked through hell. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, taking her hand. "Let me take you home." She nodded without protest. The car moved through the rain in silence. Only the steady swish of the wipers and their shallow, uneven breaths filled the space. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, but every few seconds, he glanced at her as if to make sure she was still there, still safe, still breathing. "Who was he?" she asked finally. "A hired hand." "I don't know who sent him yet." "Because of me," Ryan's jaw tightened. "Maybe. Or because of me. Either way. We're tied together now. Claire." She looked at him, the dim streetlight painting his face in gold and shadow. In that fleeting glow, she saw everything his eyes carried: power, guilt, and unbearable loneliness. "How long have you lived like this?" she whispered. "Long enough to forget what it feels like to trust anyone." He replied hoarsely. Her heart ached. She didn't know why, but she wanted to reach for his hand. The same hand that had just saved her. The same hand that bore the weight of darkness. When the car stopped in front of the hospital, she turned to him. "Thank you." Ryan nodded, eyes softening briefly. "Go. I'll wait here." She managed a faint smile and stepped out. But before entering, she turned back. He sat in the car. Still, the streetlight washing over his face, a beautiful face etched with exhaustion and quiet pain. Inside the hospital room, her mother was asleep. Claire sat by her bedside, holding her thin, frail hand. Her mind swirled with everything that had happened. Her mother used to say, "Everything in life comes with a price." Now, Claire finally understood. Ryan had saved her, but in doing so, had drawn her into a world she'd never known existed. A world where love and danger shared the same face. She wondered if the day ever came when she had to choose between him and peace. Which would she choose? Near midnight, when she left the hospital, Ryan was still waiting. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with mist and the scent of wet asphalt. "You didn't have to wait," she said softly. "I needed to be sure you were safe. You're not my bodyguard." Ryan tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "No, but I want to be the last person you see before you fall asleep." The words made her freeze. Something inside her melted. "You're joking." "I rarely joke." She laughed, a quiet, trembling laugh. Raindrops still clung to her hair. Ryan reached out, brushing one away. His hand lingered longer than it should have. A second passed. Then another. The world held its breath. "You're shaking," he murmured. His voice was almost a whisper. "I'm fine. Just not used to the way you look at me." Ryan leaned closer. The space between them dissolved until their breaths mingled. "If I told you I've been trying to stop myself for a long time, would you believe me?" Claire didn't answer. Her eyes met his, wet, luminous, filled with something beyond words. He didn't kiss her. He simply rested his forehead against hers, a touch that felt like an apology. "Don't make me save you again, Claire," he whispered, "because next time, I might not be able to stop myself." By the time she returned home, the sky had cleared. The clouds had drifted away, leaving a pale, silver moon above the quiet city. She stood by the window, watching its light spill onto the street below. Ryan's words echoed in her mind. I might not be able to stop myself. And she knew at that moment whatever bound them now was no longer just duty or fate. It was something thinner, sharper, more dangerous, a thread tightening between love and the abyss. In the days following the attack in the parking lot, Cooper Logistics felt shrouded in fog. Everything still ran on schedule, the measured footsteps, the routine exchange of contracts, but beneath that rhythm lingered a quiet tension, as if everyone knew something fundamental had changed and could never return to the way it was. Claire felt it too. She still sat at her same desk, still brewed Ryan's coffee each morning, still adjusted her collar before meetings. But in her eyes now lived something new understanding. And Ryan, the man who once made her curious, now made her afraid of losing him. One Monday morning, Ryan handed her a thin folder. "Look through this. It's the draft for our negotiation with the Spanish partners, but I want you to rewrite it in your own words." "Me," Claire blinked. "I trust you. They won't dare underestimate you." That single word trust sent a tremor through her, not because it was flattering, but because she understood for Ryan. Trust was rarer than love itself. 3 days later, Claire flew with Ryan to Barcelona for the negotiations. It was their first official appearance together, and of course, the eyes that followed them were many. On the plane, Ryan sat beside her, reviewing documents, but occasionally glancing her way. Claire tried to focus, but their proximity was close enough for her to feel the warmth of his hand each time their fingers brushed the same page. "Nervous?" he asked quietly. "No, just anxious. It's my first major meeting." Ryan smiled faintly. "You forget that back in Chicago. You stood in a room full of people and didn't look away once. That's why I chose you." Claire turned her head, hiding a small smile. "You always say things that make it hard for people to stay calm." "Only when that person makes me lose my calm first," he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. For a second, she didn't dare look at him, because if she did, she might believe those eyes weren't meant only for a colleague. The conference room in Barcelona was bright and elegant, filled with warm Spanish voices. The men across the table, used to American arrogance, clearly didn't expect to face a woman with calm eyes, chestnut hair, and a voice both soft and commanding. Claire spoke flawless Spanish. Not just translating, she led the conversation, maneuvering each phrase like a strategic move on a chessboard. When the meeting ended, one of the Spanish delegates smiled and shook her hand. "Señorita Donovan, you make me forget that power doesn't always come in the shape of a man." Ryan said nothing, but pride flickered behind his composed expression. As they left, he murmured, "I used to think power was something you could buy with money. But today, you reminded me sometimes. It's in the way someone listens." Claire smiled faintly. "And I've learned that real power doesn't need to be shown only to know it can't be subdued." Their eyes met a silent exchange heavy with meaning neither dared to name. The night in Barcelona was warm, perfumed with orange blossoms. They sat on the hotel balcony overlooking the city glowing beneath them. Claire poured him a glass of wine. The crimson light shimmered on Ryan's cheekbones, softening his sharpness. "Have you ever thought about walking away from all this?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a few seconds, then set his glass down. "Every night. But when morning comes, I go back, because there are things that would fall apart if I left." "And me?" she asked softly. "You," he gave a wistful smile. "You never had anything to lose. Until you met me." He frowned at her words. "Don't say that. But it's true. You make me want to believe even when I know the place you stand is one where light never reaches." Ryan looked at her, his gaze piercing the calm she tried to hold. He reached out, brushed his thumb gently beneath her chin. "You don't need to believe me, Claire. Just believe that when I look at you, nothing else exists." For a heartbeat. She couldn't move. Her heart pounded, yet she felt a strange peace. Then he drew his hand back, as though afraid of his own restraint. "We leave tomorrow. It's finished here." She nodded. Though part of her wasn't ready to leave, not this city. Not the version of herself that had finally stopped being someone else's shadow. Back in Chicago, their brief calm vanished. Anonymous messages began appearing on her phone. "You know more than you should. Cooper can't protect you forever." Claire didn't tell Ryan immediately. She tried to stay composed, to act normal, but sleep became a stranger. One evening, while she stayed late finishing a contract, Ryan appeared at her door. "You're not heading home." "Just a few more pages," she said with a tired smile. He set a coffee cup down beside her. "Drink? You look like you've been fighting the whole world." "Sometimes," she said softly. "The world is your work." He frowned. What's going on? She shook her head, but his eyes didn't waver. Claire, he said quietly, there's something you're not telling me. After a pause, she unlocked her phone and handed it to him. The messages glowed against the screen. Ryan's face darkened. His hands tightened, the faintest tremor visible in his knuckles. How long? 3 days. He pulled out his own phone, speaking in clipped tones. Trace every source. Leave no one unchecked. Then he looked back at her. His calm cracked open. I told you when you stepped into my world, my enemies would see you too. I'm not afraid. I am, he said, his voice breaking, raw and human. I'm afraid that one day, what I'm trying to protect will disappear right before my eyes. She stood and reached for his hand. Ryan, you can't control everything, but at least you can choose not to lose yourself. He looked at her, and in his eyes, power and fragility met in equal measure. Then he took her hand and placed it against his chest. The problem is, Claire, he whispered, I don't know who I am anymore when you're not here. Silence fell. Outside, wind brushed the tall glass windows, whispering like a distant sea. They stood face to face, caught between a world too real and a dream too fragile. And in that moment, Claire understood she was no longer the one being protected. She had become the reason a man like Ryan Cooper finally learned how to fear, and that was the truest power of all. That morning, Chicago was colder than usual. A thin mist draped over the skyline, wrapping the city in a veil of smoke and secrecy. Claire stepped into the office, her cup of hot coffee suddenly weightless in her hand, as if her intuition had whispered that today would not be peaceful. Ever since the anonymous messages appeared, Ryan had changed. He spoke less, smiled even less, and often vanished into secret meetings that stretched deep into the night. Claire understood his silence wasn't coldness, but caution, the survival instinct of a man who lived too long on the knife's edge of power and betrayal. She didn't blame him. But between them, a fine thread of distance began to form, woven from fear of losing each other, and a trust not yet strong enough to erase it. That afternoon, as Claire reviewed translation documents from Italy, Ethan Ward entered the room. Ethan Ryan's right hand was a man of perfect suits, polished manners, and a smile so polite it felt rehearsed. Good afternoon. Claire, he said, placing a folder on her desk. Ryan wants you to review these shipment contracts for next week. She nodded and took them, but after flipping through a few pages, she froze. There at the corner of each sheet were strange marks, 3 slanted parallel lines, faint but deliberate. She had seen them before on the first contract Ryan ever gave her. Back then, she thought it was just a note, a habit. But now, those same markings appeared on a document prepared by someone else. Claire looked up. Ethan was still smiling, though his eyes no longer looked friendly. Something wrong, she said softly, hiding her unease. He nodded and turned to leave. But just before the door closed, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear, Be careful, Claire. Around here, people don't die for lying. They die for knowing too much truth. The door clicked shut, leaving her shivering. That night, Ryan returned late. Claire was waiting for him in his office, the warm lamplight soft against her tired face. When he opened the door, she stood up. Ryan, I need to ask you something. He quietly removed his coat. What is it, Ethan? She said, her voice trembling but steady. Do you trust him? Ryan paused. The question made him look at her for a long time. Why are you asking? Because today's contract had the same symbol as your confidential files. I don't think it's a coincidence. Silence filled the room. Outside, the wind slapped against the glass, sounding like waves crashing. You're certain? He asked. I couldn't mistake it. Ryan turned to the window, his shoulders tense in the dim light. I've suspected him, but now I have proof. What will you do? Strike back? He turned around, and for the first time in weeks, she saw the other Ryan, not the calm strategist, but the man whose name once made entire networks hesitate. Ethan thinks I've gone soft because of you. He believes if he hits where it hurts, I'll lose focus. Claire's breath caught. Where it hurts? Ryan stepped closer, his voice a deep whisper. You... Claire! 2 days later, Cooper Logistics called for an emergency board meeting. It was unannounced, held after dark. Around the long mahogany table, faces were tense, eyes sharp reflections of the bright white lights above like blades in the dark. Ryan sat at the head of the table, composed, a folder in hand. Someone in this room sold information to the Miami syndicate. No one spoke. Only the rhythmic tapping of his pen echoed through the silence steady, unnerving. That person thought they could hide by altering transaction codes. But someone sharp enough noticed what the rest of us missed. His gaze landed briefly on Claire. She said nothing, only met his eyes. Then Ryan threw the folder onto the table. Papers scattered one sheet landing directly before Ethan. The color drained from Ethan's face. "What are you saying?" "Ryan," he forced a laugh, though his voice shook. "You know exactly what I'm saying." Ryan's voice was cool steel.
You sold the South Point warehouse codes to Miami. Because of you, 2 of my men are dead. I'm giving you a chance to explain right now. The room fell silent. Ethan looked around, seeking support, but found only cold, closed faces. He laughed dryly, his tone turning sharp. So that's it. You think I'm the traitor? Or are you just scared your little assistant knows too much? So you need a scapegoat. A collective intake of breath. Claire stood abruptly. Enough. Ethan, he smirked. Look at her defending you like a wife defending her husband. You think he'd burn his empire for you. Sweetheart Ryan said nothing. He simply rose, each step he took around the table echoing like a heartbeat. When he stopped behind Ethan, the air froze. You're right about one thing, Ryan said evenly. I would lose everything if someone touched her. Before Ethan could move, Ryan's hand shot out, gripping his collar and slamming him onto the table. You think I didn't know you planted men in Miami, that you sent those anonymous threats to her? His voice was calm, too calm. This isn't about power. It's about trust, and you just buried yours. He signaled with one hand. 2 men in black entered, silent, professional, and dragged Ethan out of the room. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud. The air reeked of iron and exhaustion. When they were finally alone, Ryan sank into a chair, weary. Claire walked over and laid a hand on his shoulder. You okay? She asked softly. Okay, he let out a humorless laugh. Every time I have to cut someone close to me, I ask myself, what exactly am I saving? You're saving yourself, she said gently, and the ones who still believe in you. He looked up at her gray eyes dulled with fatigue, yet a flicker of warmth returned as they met hers. I don't deserve your trust. I'll be the one to decide that. Silence settled again. In that moment, they weren't a boss and his aide. They were 2 people, one too familiar with blood, the other still foolish enough to believe that kindness could save. Ryan reached out, brushing his fingertips against her cheek. You know, when I met you, every plan I ever had stopped making sense. She smiled, eyes glistening. That's a shame. I happen to like a man who knows exactly what he's doing. He laughed, a real laugh this time. It was rare, so rare that she wished she could keep it forever. Later that night, as Claire left the office, she glanced back through the glass wall. Ryan was still there, sitting alone beneath the white light. On his desk lay a small slip of paper, with one sentence written in his bold handwriting. If you die, I have no reason to live. She didn't know whether he had written it for her or for himself, but she knew one thing for certain in a world where power had 2 faces. Their love was the only thing without a mask. And though both of them knew this path could only end in blood, neither had the heart to turn back. Winter descended on Chicago, wrapping the city in sheets of white. Golden lights along Michigan Avenue shimmered across wet asphalt, glowing faintly like fragments of a dream Claire couldn't decide whether to forget or hold on to. It had been 2 weeks since the night Ryan punished Ethan. 2 weeks since Cooper Logistics began to settle back into order, except her heart hadn't. Claire still worked, still came to the office each morning, still translated diplomatic contracts in 3 languages. But something inside her had cracked. Not out of fear, but from understanding him too well. She finally saw Ryan for who he truly was, the man who had saved her in the rain, whose trembling hands once shielded her, was also a man who lived by paying a price for every act of survival.
She no longer believed love could change someone's nature. But she wasn't brave enough to leave either, because every time she looked into his eyes, she saw something no one else ever did in Ryan Cooper, a loneliness so deep it bordered on despair. One afternoon, Ryan walked into her office without knocking. He wore a black shirt, tie loosened, expression shadowed. "Get ready for tonight's event," he said hoarsely. "The board wants to meet you." "Me?" Claire frowned. "Yes. They want to see the woman who closed the Barcelona deal. I want them to know no one in this company can replace you. From anyone else." Those words might have sounded like flattery, but from Ryan, they carried the weight of a confession. That evening, the gala at the Lancaster Hotel shimmered with opulence. Claire arrived in a deep velvet blue gown, shoulders bare, hair pinned low. As she entered, heads turned not just for her beauty, but because she walked beside Ryan Cooper, the man Chicago both respected and feared. He leaned toward her, voice low. "They can look, but only I get to touch." The words were half warning, half admission. She smiled faintly. "That sounds like a threat wrapped in romance." "Not a threat," he murmured. "A fact." The night unfolded in the hum of jazz and the clinking of crystal. Claire moved among financiers and investors with poised brilliance. Ryan watched from a distance, lips curved, gaze softening. In those fleeting moments, he looked almost human again, until she saw Rebecca Ashford. The woman who had once humiliated Claire now stood in a corner of the ballroom, wearing a plain black dress, a tray of champagne in her trembling hands. Rebecca looked older, worn, stripped of her former grandeur. The sight froze Claire in place. Memories flooded back the laughter, the spilled wine, the contemptuous eyes. Ryan noticed the shift in her expression. He followed her gaze, then asked quietly, "Do you want me to have her removed?" She shook her head. "No need." Claire set down her glass and walked toward Rebecca. The older woman startled, nearly dropping her tray. "Claire?" Her voice broke. "Good evening, Mrs. Ashford," Claire said calmly. No anger, only a composure that made the older woman's shame burn brighter. "I didn't expect to see you." "Here." Rebecca lowered her eyes. "I just work for the event company now. I need the money." The simplicity of that answer carried a lifetime of ruin. Claire looked at her hands once adorned with diamonds, now rough and cracked, and instead of satisfaction, she felt something unexpected: forgiveness. "Are you well?" Claire asked softly. Rebecca looked up, eyes glistening. "I don't deserve that question. You once made me stand in front of a crowd, soaked and humiliated," Claire said gently. "But if it hadn't been for that night, I'd never have met him." Rebecca followed her gaze to Ryan, standing a few meters away, watching, his expression unreadable, cold as a mirror of their past. "I regret it," Rebecca whispered, voice breaking. "Every night, I raised my son to be a monster. Tyler, he killed himself in prison 3 months ago." Claire went still. All her anger dissolved, replaced by a quiet sorrow. There were no winners in this story. Not Rebecca, not Tyler, not even herself. Only people caught in the machinery of pride and power. She reached out, touching the woman's scarred hand. "You can start again. It's not too late." Rebecca wept. "I don't know whom to thank or to hate anymore." "Thank you, Claire. You have a heart I never had." Claire nodded slightly, then turned away. Ryan met her eyes, said nothing, but placed a steadying hand on her back, a silent gesture of admiration. On the drive home, snow fell thick against the windows. Silence filled the car. The streetlights blurred into golden ribbons through the glass. "You knew about Tyler's death?" Claire asked quietly. "I did," Ryan replied. "But I didn't tell you. I didn't want you to feel responsible." "I don't," she said. "I just feel tired. It seems everyone has to pay, one way or another." Ryan glanced at her. "Do you think our love is a kind of price too?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But if I had to choose again, I'd still pay it." He didn't answer. Instead, his hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I don't deserve your kindness. Claire, you're wrong," she said softly. "I don't need you to deserve it. I just need you to be real." The words cracked something inside him, his mask slipping for just a second. He looked at her, eyes reflecting a fragility few would ever see. You make me believe in something I thought was long dead. What's that? That someone like me can still be forgiven. Later that night, Ryan took her to the rooftop of the Cooper Tower. The city stretched beneath them, streaks of red and gold reflected against a gray winter sky. I used to hate Chicago, he said quietly. Every street reminded me of what I'd lost. Every building was a scar. But then you came, and I saw its beauty again, not because it changed, but because you changed me. Claire said nothing. She stepped toward the railing, the cold wind lifting strands of her hair. Ryan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. I don't know what the future holds, he murmured. But if I lose everything, I want to keep this moment. Then hold on to it, she whispered, because I won't always be here to remind you. He tightened his arms around her. Don't talk like you're leaving. No one ever knows. Ryan, your world always comes with a price. He fell silent. Wind swept across the rooftop, carrying the first snowflakes of the night. Claire tilted her head, gazing upward.
Her voice was soft, almost to herself. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's stopping before hatred turns us into someone else. Ryan pressed a kiss to her forehead. I don't want forgiveness. I just want you to stay. Then love me the way you know how. Ryan, she said gently, leave forgiveness to me.
As she stepped out of his embrace, the city lights glowed across her face, warm, distant, untouchable. Ryan watched her, gripped by a sudden, nameless fear. Not fear of his enemies, but of losing the last piece of his humanity, the piece she carried for him. And that night, amid snow and silence, he understood love could not save him from the darkness, but it could make him stop before the darkness consumed them both. One early February morning, Chicago awoke beneath a silvery veil of fog. Claire stood by the window of Ryan's apartment, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Below her, cars crawled slowly through the mist, their headlights flickering like quiet embers in the haze. There were no birds, no wind, only a haunting stillness, as though the entire city was holding its breath. Ryan hadn't returned since the night before. He'd said there was something to take care of, his voice calm. But Claire had caught something in his eyes, a quiet knowing that this time was different. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He can't hide forever. Cooper will pay. You should choose a side. Her fingers went numb. Her heart pounded. The words weren't just threats anymore. They carried the scent of truth closing in. She remembered what Ryan had told her weeks ago in My World. There's no such thing as safety. And now, she finally understood what he meant. That night, Ryan came home. There were dark stains of dried blood on his shirt, and his eyes were so cold they seemed to make the room shrink around him. Claire didn't ask. She simply walked over and began wiping the blood away silently, slowly, carefully. Aren't you afraid? He asked, his voice hoarse, tired. I stopped being afraid, she whispered, when I realized you're the only person who never pretends. Ryan gave a small, broken laugh. He caught her hand, his eyes deep as midnight water. I never wanted to drag you down with me. Claire? You already have, she said, steady and soft. But at least I chose to stay. He didn't reply. He just pulled her into his arms, holding her as if letting go would make her dissolve into the fog. His warmth pressed through her skin, but inside, she felt the fracture not between them, but in the crumbling world he was trying to hold together. The next day, the unexpected happened. Cooper Logistics came under federal investigation. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, investors panicked, contracts froze. On TV, anchors spoke of an underground network operating beneath the facade of international trade. Ryan said nothing all morning. When Claire entered his office, he was standing by the window, looking down at the streets like a stranger to the empire he once ruled. It was Ethan, he said quietly. He left a trail just enough to bring everything down. Claire stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. We can still fix this, can't we? He turned to her, eyes of a man who'd lived long enough in darkness to know. Not everything can be saved. I'll take responsibility. But you won't. His tone was final. You're leaving Chicago this afternoon. She froze, Her chest tightened. "You're sending me away. I'm protecting you." "You think I can just live peacefully while you're standing in the storm?" she said, voice trembling yet fierce. "You're wrong. Ryan, I chose this path. I'm not turning back." He was silent for a long time, then smiled the saddest smile she'd ever seen. "You don't understand. When I fall, everything around me falls too, including you. Then I'll fall with you." "Claire," his voice cracked anger and desperation tangled together. "Don't say that. I couldn't stand to see you hurt." She stepped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You've been hurting your whole life, Ryan. Let me carry some of it for once." He went still trembling. 1 second. 2. Then he turned and kissed her hard, desperate as if they both knew it might be the last time. 3 days later, Ryan vanished. No calls, no messages, no trace. Federal agents sealed Cooper Logistics. The media flooded the airwaves with half-truths and speculation. They called him the shadow mogul, the man behind the laundering empire. Claire didn't believe them. She knew the man they described wasn't the one she loved, the man who once brushed raindrops from her hair, who trembled when she was hurt, who wrote in his careful hand, "If you die, I have no reason to live." But the world didn't care what she believed. She hired lawyers. She called every contact she could. No one answered. All she found was a rumor Ryan Cooper had fled the country with billions, alone in their empty apartment. She stared at a photo from Barcelona, his rare smile, his hand resting protectively on her back. She touched his face in the picture and whispered, "You can't leave me like this. Ryan." A week later, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in his familiar handwriting. "Don't look for me. If this ends and I'm still alive, I'll find my way back to you. If not, believe that I never really left." She read it over and over until her tears blurred the ink. And through her pain, a fragile smile appeared, the kind that only comes from holding on to faith when everything else is gone. 3 months passed. Winter melted away. The world forgot Ryan Cooper, as if he'd never existed. Cooper Logistics was dissolved, the accounts frozen. Claire left Chicago and moved to Seattle, where the ocean air carried salt and silence. She taught languages at a small community center and lived quietly. But every night, when the city slept, she would play the old jazz track Ryan used to play in his office, the one that filled the silence between them. The music drifted through her apartment like a fragment of his soul, lingering in the spaces logic could never fill. One rainy evening in May, she was packing up papers when a knock sounded at the door. Her heart stuttered. She didn't know why, only that the sound felt familiar, like an echo of something long buried. She opened the door. A man stood there, soaked to the bone, beard unshaven. Thinner, but those eyes, those quiet, gray eyes she would recognize in any lifetime. "Ryan," she whispered, voice trembling. He didn't speak. He just reached out, touched her cheek to make sure she was real. And she broke, sobbing, collapsing into his arms. He held her tight, his breath warm and unsteady. "I promised I'd come back if I was alive," he murmured. "And I keep my promises. You're hurt." "No, just lost everything," he said, a sad, relieved smile touching his lips. "But I found the only thing that still means something, you." She clung to him, tears mingling with the rain. "I knew you'd come back." "I know," he whispered, "because if you hadn't believed it, I'd never have found my way home." Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside that small apartment stood 2 people balanced on the thin line between ruin and rebirth, where love was no longer a promise, but proof of survival. That night, Ryan lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. "I have nothing left to lose, Claire," he said softly. "You have me," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder. He smiled, closing his eyes, whispering like a prayer. "Then I still have everything." Outside, the rain quieted, and in the calm that followed, a new chapter began. One without power, without shadows. Only 2 souls who had lost the world but found each other amid the wreckage. Seattle awoke beneath a veil of silver mist, thin as breath. Claire stirred in Ryan's arms. The small room was warm with the scent of skin and quiet breathing, but outside, The wind still howled through the glass, carrying the briny tang of the sea. He was still asleep, lashes trembling slightly as his breath brushed her neck. In the soft morning light, Claire saw how much he had changed, no longer the powerful man from Chicago, but someone who had walked through storms and was now learning how to live again. She gently touched the faint scar along his wrist. Ryan's eyes opened, meeting hers. "Did I wake you?" he murmured. "No," she smiled softly. "I just wanted to make sure you're still here." He pulled her close, whispering, "This time, I'm not going anywhere." A week later, they moved into a small cottage near Alki Beach, an old wooden house. White walls, windows facing west where each evening the sunset melted into gold. Ryan started working for a small shipping company, his name appearing in modest paperwork with a simple title, Maritime Route Coordinator. No more Cooper Logistics, no more codes, no guards, no shadows. To Claire, it felt like a quiet miracle, a miracle that required no prayers, only the courage to begin again. But some wounds never heal completely. Sometimes at night, Ryan would sit on the porch for hours, silent, holding a glass of whiskey and staring into the black horizon. Claire never asked. She would simply drape a blanket over his shoulders and sit beside him, letting their silence blend with the sound of waves. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one night, her voice soft as the dark. "Regret what, leaving it all behind?" He thought for a moment. "No, I only regret losing myself for so long. Before I met you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And have you found yourself now?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Maybe. But this time, I'm not searching alone." Spring came early to Seattle. On the porch, the lavender Claire planted bloomed purple and fragrant. She began to write not a memoir, but a way to purify memory. Sometimes Ryan would quietly read her pages, close the notebook, kiss the spine, and murmur, "You turn every scar into art. I only ever made them bleed." She laughed. "Then let me keep writing. And you learn to heal." They lived simply coffee in the mornings, walks along the shore at noon, cooking together at dusk. And when thunder rolled across the sky at night, Claire would flinch, and Ryan would hold her hand tighter, a silent promise that the darkness would not return. In June, a package arrived from Chicago, no sender listed. Inside was an old file, its red seal faded, and a single sheet of paper. No one escapes the past, but some have the courage to walk beyond it. At the bottom, the familiar symbol 3 slanted lines. Ryan froze. "Ethan," he whispered. "He's still alive." Claire reached for his hand. "Are you going back?" "No. He didn't send this to threaten me. It's his way of saying I still have a choice. A choice." He gazed out the window, where the sea shimmered under a silver sky. To let the past die. She smiled faintly. Then let it die. He nodded, slowly tearing the letter into small pieces, letting the wind carry them off the porch into the open air. That night, they sat together on the beach. The moon hung low, trembling over the dark water. Ryan traced slow circles on her back with his fingertips. "Claire," he murmured. "Yes, if you hadn't walked into my office that day, I'd still be the monster the world made me." She turned to him, eyes gentle as moonlight. "No. You were just lost. And what are you? Then I'm the way home." He looked at her, then kissed her not in haste or fear, but softly, with the quiet certainty of rebirth. Between their lips, he whispered, "You know, some people find freedom in money or power. I found mine in learning how to love." She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then you're free now." The next morning, the sun rose blazing and clear. On the table lay Claire's finished journal. On the final page, she had written, "He was once a storm, I was once ash." But when the two met, a new world was born, not a place to hide, but a place to return to. Ryan read it, then signed his initials beneath receipt. "Are you signing your love sentence?" she teased. "No," he said, smiling. "I'm signing a promise that I'll never let you disappear from our story." She leaned on his shoulder, watching sunlight spill across the room. Outside, the ocean shimmered, the waves kept rolling in. whispering that every ending is only the beginning of another journey. Years later, people would tell stories of an old couple living by the sea near Seattle in a white wooden cottage filled with lavender and laughter. Every morning, they sat by the window with coffee and notebooks, writing side by side. No one knew who they had once been, only that when the wind passed by. It carried the sound of their joy across the waves. And on their desk, carved into the wood, were the words, "Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's remembering without pain." Claire Donovan and Ryan Cooper. They had found each other not in glory, but in the quietest form of peace, and that, perhaps, was the truest definition of happiness. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that keeps stories like this alive and helps them reach more hearts.